everybody, it's a beautiful Saturday. I am Professor Khalil Amani, and this is Khalil Amani's World 100. We're still talking about paganism, but I want to make it clear that I give props and shout outs to paganism and all the pagans around the world going back to time immemorial. I am not like these Christians. I am not like these Hebrew Israelites. And I am not like these Israelites where I condemn paganism and I talk crazy about paganism. That's not me. If you want to hear the anti-paganism stuff, go over to a different channel. Over here, we give props to the pagans because we understand who they were, who they are. That's right. The pagans are the beginners. They are the mothers and fathers of all religion. If you are a Jew, Christian, or Muslim, your mama and your daddy is the pagans. I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. I can't help. Because you don't know religious history. This is part two. Part two. In part one, I laid out a whole lot of folks, a whole lot of reasons why paganism are the beginning and foundation of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In part one, I let you know that the pagans gave you Abraham, the pagans gave you the serpent, the pagans gave you the Christmas tree. Hell, the pagans gave you monotheism, the belief in one God. The pagans gave you the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. The pagans gave you the archetypal dying and rising God, Jesus. The pagans gave you Easter, and the pagans gave you Christmas. The pagans gave you Halloween. Hell, the pagans gave you the word Hebrew, and the pagans gave you the word Christian. The pagans gave you stories like the flood story. The pagans gave you a lot of stuff. Yes, they did. Let's get right into it. Let's get right into it. It's amazing how we try to shit on the pagans and denigrate and disrespect the pagans, when the truth of the matter is, if it were not for the pagans and paganism, you wouldn't have no Christmases, no jolly old Saint Nick. The pagans gave you that. If it weren't for the pagans, you wouldn't have Easter and Easter egg hunts for the little childrens. The pagans gave you that. Shout out to Eostra, the pagan fertility goddess. Eostra, where the word Easter comes from. The pagans gave you the very name Hebrew. It was the pagan Canaanites that labeled and classified Abraham's people Hebrews. They created the term. And let's not forget, Abraham himself was a pagan, born into Sumerian paganism, born into the belief of the goddess, born into a polytheistic society. The father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Born a pagan. I mean, the nerve of you Christians and the nerve of you Hebrew Israelites, the nerve of you Israelites. Always got something bad to say about pagans and paganism. It's like you shitting on your mama. It's like you are denying being born of a pagan woman. And your daddy, you came out of the loins of your pagan daddy's balls. And today, in the year 2025, 2026, you out here acting like Judaism and Christianity, Islam is autonomous. You out here acting like Judaism, Christianity, Islam sits on a lonely island by themselves. They have no roots to the inland. Use a lie. Use a lie. And so it was a pagan named Abraham, aka Abram, who introduced and gave the world the whole Hebrew, the whole Israelite tradition. And from Abraham, who would become the father of many nations, it was this pagan, this man Abraham, born into a pagan society, born in Ur of the Chaldees, Genesis 11, born into paganism, knew and worshiped the deity known as Inanna, the goddess. But it would be this pagan Abraham that would spawn the three great Western religions known as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Even the Muslims claim Abraham as their eponymous ancestor through Ishmael, Abraham's first son. The pagans are the shit. Again, if you want to hear that anti-paganism, bashing pagans, go somewhere else. Because you're nothing but a Bible believer, a non-religio historical person. That's all you are. Because when you study religio history, you understand that the pagan precedes the Jew and the Christian and the Muslim. And you understand that many of the stories you read in the Bible can be found in earlier sources. The Enuma Elish, the Egyptian Book of the Dead. These sources predate by thousands of years the Bible's narrative. So if you're looking to hear some hate for the pagans, this ain't that. And the only reason that you hate the pagans is because you ignorant. Because you haven't been taught the foundation of that which you believe. We read in part 1. We read in part 1, go back to part 1. But we read in part 1, we read Gerald Massey's brilliant exhortation of the mindset of the Bible believers. That they have to close their eyes to see. That's what Gerald Massey said. Gerald Massey said that Bible niggas and Quranic niggas, they have to close their eyes to see. And what he meant was they closed their eyes to all of the pre-biblical literature, the pre-Quranic literature. They act like the Enuma Elish from the Sumero-Babylonians did not exist. They act like there wasn't a flood story in the Babylonian Enuma Elish, the Epic of Gilgamesh. They act like a Bible flood story didn't exist that predates the Noah flood story. And so Gerald Massey eloquently and brilliantly says that niggas, that these Bible believers, they have to close their eyes to see. They close their eyes to everything that precedes the Bible. And then they can open their eyes and say, hey, the Bible is the original. The Bible is the truth. The Bible is the oldest There's nothing that comes before the Bible. All of the Bible stories are original. You have to close your eyes to see. That's what Gerald Massey said to y'all. What a brilliant, brilliant writer he was. I implore you, I beg you to go back to my part 1. And you will get the actual quotes and what he says. Gerald Massey also goes on to say that all of your names of God, you know, Jehovah, Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahweh, Yahweh, Elohim, Adonai, Hashem, all your names for God, they are nothing but spurious, what do you say, interpretations? How do you say that? I don't want to misquote the man. Oh, he got you right. Let's find it real quick. Here we go. Spurious counterfeits. That's the word he used. All the names you call God, Elohim, Allah, all these are nothing but spurious, weirdo counterfeits of the ancient gods. We're talking about paganism, and we have to understand, if we are serious about religio history, that the pagans came first. Just like the goddess came before the god, the woman came before the man, we have to understand that the pagans came before the so-called monotheistic faiths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And in understanding that, we have to acknowledge that the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, he comes out of paganism. Abraham comes from the goddess worshipping pagans of Sumer. Facts upon facts. Want to debate me on it? There's no debate. Now I want to talk about you Christians. I want to talk about the most important man in Christianity. You might say it's Jesus. I say you're wrong. You might even throw the Apostle Paul in the mix, and you damn sure wrong. The most important man in Christianity, when it comes to allowing the religion known as Christianity and all of its bastard children, I say Christianity and all of its bastard children, you know, the Protestant, the Methodist, Baptist, so forth. But there's one man who's central and the most important man to Christianity, and he was a pagan. Lord, how y'all like to disrespect the pagans. The pagans gave you Judaism, Christianity, and Islam through the pagan worshiping Abraham in his younger days. The pagans gave you the word Hebrew to label those people. And when we move on to Christianity, again, it is the head of the curve, the far-reaching pagans that come to the fore. But there's one man, the most important figure in Christianity, that allows Christianity to take root, to spring forth, to rise up, to prosper, and to become a world religion. Who am I talking about? I know they don't teach this in church, because they want to give all the credit for Christianity to Jesus and Paul. I said in your church, they want to give the credit to Jesus and Paul as being the two great Christians in history And from them, Christianity, gets a foothold. There's a lot of religions that start out, but they are suppressed and trod underfoot, and they never become a world religion. It is a feat. It is an astronomical feat to go from one man's ideal to world religion. Sometimes men come along with great ideals and they get a little following, but at some point, their following disappears. But how was this following of the early Jesus church, how did it become a world religion with over almost 2 billion followers? The credit goes to one man. His name was Emperor Constantine. Emperor Constantine is by far, without doubt, barring no other Christian figure in history, the most important person in the advent and growth and development of Christianity. But guess what? This guy, Emperor Constantine, he was a pagan. This is Emperor Constantine, a pagan who converted quasi to Christianity. He was the emperor of Rome during a time and a period where Christians were being persecuted. During a time where Christians were being fed to the lions in the Colosseums for sport and play. Like we watch the Super Bowl on Sunday, they go to the Colosseum and they watch Christians being put in the middle of the Colosseum floor, and they open the cages and let the lions out. And the Christians go to and fro, up and down, running throughout the Colosseum for their lives. And they are tackled by lions and eaten and bitten and torn from limb to limb. That's what was going on in the days of Constantine. But when Constantine converted, or should I say prior to Constantine's conversion, the Christian movement was on its way out the door. The Christian was being violated like you would never believe. And in time and with time, Christianity would be put in the dirt. Had it not been for the conversion of Emperor Constantine, the heathen and the pagan Emperor Constantine. Yeah. The Christian and the Hebrew Israelite, these Israelite folks, they want to think that Jesus and Paul, Christianity started with them and moving on up. They don't understand the history. They don't understand the backlash to Christians. They don't understand the turmoil that Christians of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries had to endure. What Christianity needed by the 4th century is someone of power who could stabilize the religion. For if no one would ever come along and stabilize the religion known as Christianity, undoubtedly it wouldn't be here today. I'm here to let you know that it was a Roman pagan. You like to talk so bad about the pagans, but it was a pagan that stabilized the religion of Christianity. His name was Emperor Constantine. Facts upon facts. Why do we have so much disdain and anger and venom and vitriol for paganism? Why? I'll tell you why. Because our Jewish and Christian and Islamic belief systems have painted pagans to be everything from Satan, Lucifer, and devil worshippers to being atheists. When the reality is, the pagans are the first to have God consciousness. The pagans are the first to think outside of themselves and visualize something greater than themselves in that great cosmic abyss. Look at how we have positioned the pagans in 2026. Look at them. Gerald Massey calls them, says that the Western religions have spoiled them as pagans. Understand this also. The very word pagan and paganism, that's not a word that any so-called pagan ever called themselves. Just like the pagans gave you the name Hebrew, just like the pagans gave you the name Christian, that's right, the word Christian is a pagan word. The pagans were naming people. Let's call them Hebrews. Let's call them Christians. And so it was with the word pagan. Others would name them pagans. Facts upon facts. I said the pagans created the word Christian. How ironic that you Christians hate the pagans, talk bad about the pagans, think that paganism is a scourge of the earth, think that paganism is spilled milk, but the very name you call yourselves, Christians, the pagans gave it to you. Shut up or source up. See? Yes. Pagans and others outside the religion gave the followers of Jesus the name Christian. See? The term first appeared in the city of Antioch as recorded in the New Testament, book of Acts. Early followers of Jesus were first called disciples, and the name Christian was applied to them by outsiders to denote their affiliation with Christ. The name Christian was given to you by pagans. Furthermore, let me pull it up. I don't have it here, but I'll pull it up. The very word Christian back then was actually derogatory. The word Christian that you call yourself, that the pagans named you, see? No, Jesus' immediate followers were not called Christians. They were initially called disciples, believers, or followers of the way. Here it is. The term Christian was first used by non-believers, aka pagans, in Antioch around 40-44 CE to describe followers of Christ, possibly as a derogatory, a nasty venom and vitriol, bad name, a derogatory term that the believers later embraced as a badge of honor. See? So, to my good Christian brothers and sisters, you ought to pay homage. You ought to pay respects to the people that gave you your name. The Christians, so-called Christians, were named that by pagans. And it was a term, a derogatory term, like how they call black people niggers. The pagans called these new Christ believers Christians. They said it in scorn and ridicule. And later on, just like black folk would take the word nigger, flip it and rub it down and make it a term of endearment and call themselves niggas. So it was with the early Jesus followers that Paul converted. They would flip that bastardized, negative and derogatory word Christian. They would embrace it and say, yes, we Christians, we are the followers of Christ. They took a bad word and they made it good. But when it comes to the advent and the elevation of the Christian movement, the Christian church, the credit goes to a pagan. His name was Constantine. Emperor Constantine. And Emperor Constantine would do great things. He would bring together pagans and Christians alike. He would bring the followers of Apollo and sun worshippers, he would bring them together with the Christians. And when Constantine converts, he decrees, he ends, he does away with Christian persecution. No more Christians in the Colosseums where the lions would rip them up for sport and play. No more of that. Because he was a Christian, a pagan Christian. Because when you understand Constantine, you understand that he never gave up his pagan worship also. There are coins with Constantine and the Cairo, the Christian label on one side, and Apollo, the pagan deity, on the other side of the coin. Constantine, he merely integrated the burgeoning religions that were around him. And because he became a Christian himself, this pagan, he did away with Christian persecution. He did away with it. He would go on, Constantine would go on to deal with the nature of Christ, not that he cared, but because there was a hubbub, because there was much ado in Alexandria, Egypt, Africa, over the nature of Jesus, the nature of Christ. In his old age, in his 60s, Emperor Constantine, the pagan, who had stopped the persecution of the Christians, he convened a synod at Nicaea, or Nice. It was the first and arguably the most important meeting of Christianity. This man Constantine, this pagan, he set in motion Christianity. This pagan Constantine, he defined who the Christ was for all eternity. Whatever you think you know about Jesus Christ, it can be traced back to the 4th century under the reign of Emperor Constantine. Facts upon facts. If you say that Jesus is the Son of God, you can thank Constantine. If you think that Jesus is the same as God, one and the same, you can thank the pagan Emperor Constantine. Because back in the 4th century, they were debating that shit. Constantine, the pagan, who in his old age, 60s, he wanted peace and tranquility in the Roman Empire. He writes letters to people saying, please restore my quiet days and untroubled nights. I'm just coming off the dome right now. I can show you all this, and I probably will down the road. Yeah, I probably will down the road. But I want you to understand that it was paganism and the Roman pagan emperor Constantine who sets in motion and puts Christianity on the good foot. Facts. You got niggas around here like Israel Struggle Doctrine calling himself an Israelite Christian, unwittingly and unknowingly paying respect and homage to paganism by labeling himself a Christian. Oh no! Oh, Israel Struggle Doctrine, he woefully rejects the word Hebrew as in Hebrew Israelite, owning to the fact that it was pagans, the Canaanites and the Egyptians, that coined the term Hebrew and gave it to Abraham's people. He understands that wholeheartedly. And for that reason, he rejects being called a Hebrew. Yet, the fuck nigga calls himself a Christian because he has not embraced the fact and the truth that the very word Christian was also wrought out of paganism. That's a bitter pill he doesn't want to swallow. He doesn't mind swallowing the I'm not a Hebrew because the word Hebrew comes out of the pagan Canaanites and the pagan Egyptians. I get that, he says, on one side of his mouth. But then Israel Struggle Doctrine would call himself an Israelite Christian. He don't want nothing to do with the fact that it was pagans who created the word Christian, and it was pagans that used the word Christian as a derogatory term, that it was pagans that would label the Jesus followers under the Apostle Paul as Christians. He don't want nothing to do with that religious history. See, let's just face it. When the Bible says in John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free, not set you free, make you free. That statement, that scripture, it comes with qualifiers. As long as that truth lines up with what I specifically want to believe, then it's okay. But when I come across disturbing truth, like the word Christian, that I use and call myself, I reject John 8:32. And ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. I reject that shit because it goes against what I believe in. It goes against what I call myself. I'm an Israelite Christian, whatever the fuck that is. And guess what? There's only one Israelite Christian on the planet Earth, and that is Israel Struggle Doctrine. Maybe two, maybe Hananiah. But you can't find the term or the phrase Israelite Christian in no religious writings. This same guy, Israel Struggle Doctrine, who feigns like he's separate and apart from paganism. One of his great teachers, a white man, the late great Dr. Herbert W. Armstrong. He was a great Christian teacher. It was Dr. Herbert W. Armstrong and his brilliant Christian teachings that helped shape and formulate Israel Struggle's ideal of calling himself an Israelite Christian, because Herbert W. Armstrong, he used something similar. He used something Israelite, referring to the new Israelites or the new Christians. This is where Israel Doctrine gets his Israelite Christian from. See, we got him down. We know who he is. We know that his theology it's not just from Elder Bowie and the Israel of God Church. It's also from people like the late great Dr. Herbert W. Armstrong. And he was a great, I got one of his books on my shelf. I got one of his books on my shelf. He was a great apocalyptic end time Christian preacher. He had a lot of knowledge. Herbert W. Armstrong had a lot of knowledge. He broke down the book of Daniel and Revelations pretty much like no other. He made us understood what it means when Daniel says in a time, times, and the dividing of a time, that represent 3.5 years. Time is 1, times is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, and the dividing of a time is a half. It was people like Herbert W. Armstrong that made us understand the book of Daniel and the book of Revelation and the apocalyptic scriptures. I got no problem with Herbert W. Armstrong. But all this shit is about paganism. All this shit is about paganism. And so now, you should know by now, not only did the pagans give us Abraham, and from Abraham we would get Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The three great and biggest world religions. They are spawned and developed and wrought, came up through the roots of the ground through a pagan. That this so-called God of the Bible, the God of Israel, he used a pagan to bring forth all the families of the earth, as the Bible teaches us. How are we going to diss the pagans when Abraham was a pagan? How are we not going to pay homage to the pagans? No Abraham, there are no Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Knowing now that paganism has been highly influential in the development of God consciousness, it's time for us to give the pagan his respect. I'm giving the pagans their flowers, whether they are dead or alive. The pagans gave us world religions, and the pagans gave us Christianity, which is a world religion. The pagans named Abraham a Hebrew, and the pagans named the Jesus followers Christians. Facts upon facts. I said the pagans They gave Abraham his name. The pagans, they gave Abraham his nationality. The pagans, they invented a name for this pagan named Abraham, who came out of Sumer, a goddess worshiper, a pagan himself. It was pagan Canaanites and later pagan Egyptians that gave this pagan Abraham his nationality. You are a Hebrew, says the pagans to one of their own pagans, Abraham. And then we go 2,000 years into the future, and we land in 1 AD, 6 BCE, the birth of Jesus, who spawns a movement, a new form of Judaism. A new form of Judaism that would grow so much so that a Jew boy, allegedly, some scholars say that Paul was never even a Jew, never even a Hebrew, never even an Israelite. And there's some credibility to that because Paul, he makes a big hoo-ha about his bloodline and his lineage. He wants people to respect it. The Apostle Paul, he wants to convince people he's from Benjamin. He sat at the feet of Gamaliel. He was a Pharisee. He's a Hebrew. He's an Israelite. He makes a big hoo-ha of his own bloodline, his roots, his family tree, his nationality, his pedigree. He wants to convince people. But you have other Christians like the Gnostic Ebionites. The Gnostic Ebionites of the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd centuries who reject Paul. They reject and say he was never a Jew, a Hebrew, or an Israelite. They reject his claim. They reject his pedigree. I'm talking about the Ebionites, a bona fide Christian movement in and of themselves. You go read the history. And so, this guy, Saul, who becomes Paul, who may have very well been a pagan himself, for he took his message that the Jerusalem church under James, Peter, and John, and the rest of the disciples, he took that message and he took it to the pagans and to the heathen. But he says he's a Hebrew. That's some side-eye shit. A Hebrew taking a Hebrew message to a pagan audience. Where they do that at? Yeah. Where we at? You got time. And this guy Paul, having taken his message to pagans, here again, the Apostle Paul, he wasn't trying to convert Jews or Hebrews or Israelites. He had love for the pagans, but you don't. Why is it? Why is it in 2026 you niggas hate the pagans and got everything bad to say about pagans, but Paul put his life on the line, went to jail, and was eventually murdered over the pagans, i.e. the Gentiles. The Gentiles were but a day, when they converted to Judaism or Christianity, they were but a day out of practicing the Roman religions of Attis and Cybele, Jupiter and Zeus, Apollo. These were pagan people. You got this venom and vitriol. You got nothing good to say about the pagans and paganism. Yet the Apostle Paul's mission in life was to the pagan world known as the Gentiles. You see how fucked up we are? You got the second most important man in Christianity, Jesus first, Apostle Paul second. Some might say Paul is the first and Jesus is the second. You can argue that. But whether he was first or second, one of the most influential and certainly the dude who wrote more about Christianity than anybody else, Apostle Paul. He's trying to save pagans. He's trying to root the pagans up out of their former belief systems and make them Jesus believers. But they're pagans, just like Abraham was a pagan who leaves Sumer. Paul goes to the pagan lands, Laodicea, Antioch, Pergasus, Damascus, Galatia, Corinth. He goes to the pagan world. The pagans are important to his ministry. Without the pagans, Paul has no ministry because he certainly cannot talk to the Jews, to the Hebrews, to the Israelites because they understood, remembered, and knew what the fuck the Apostle Paul had did to their relatives and family members when he was a hireling of the Roman government when he went by the name Saul. The pagans. I think I'm about... No, I want to show you something. Show you something. Let me see. Yes. In this season of Christmas, and so many of you Black Power, Hebrew Israelite, Black conscious, you want to condemn holidays like Christmas, calling it paganism, and it is. And shout out to the pagans and their efforts to make the Christian world see them. I invite you to study the life of Constantine and read about the first council of Nice or Nicaea. It was a pagan emperor, a pagan king who had a quasi conversion to Christianity. And through this man's quasi Christian conversion, through this pagan man and his efforts to have harmony and unity in the Roman Empire, the Christian found salvation, not in Jesus, but in this man, Constantine. If this man, Constantine, had never converted to Christianity, today we might not know anything about Christianity. If this man had not converted to Christianity, we might not know nothing or very little about the fella known as Jesus Christ. And that's a fact upon another fact. Certainly, certainly the two greatest historians of that period, one who lived while Jesus was alive, and one who was born 4 years after the death of Jesus. Certainly the two greatest historians of the first century, two men that were known heavily for their writings. The two greatest Jewish or Israelite historians of the period said very little about Jesus Christ. You see him on my shelf? See him right there? Can you see him? See him? Josephus? See? Josephus and Philo. These were contemporaries of Jesus. Philo was a contemporary of Jesus as a historian, born in, I believe, 20 BC, 30 BC, and died after Jesus. I think he died in 40 AD. Philo on my shelf, he was a historian, a philosopher historian, a contemporary of Jesus. And Philo says nothing about the man you call Jesus Christ. And then Josephus, Josephus, who was also a damn near contemporary of Jesus, being born 4 years after they crucified Jesus in 37, and he lived to 100 AD or 100 CE. So I say that Philo, the philosopher historian, and Josephus, the Jewish historian turned Roman citizen, both contemporaries of Jesus, they had very little to say about Jesus. Philo says nothing about Jesus, and what is written in the works of Josephus, by every account, by every literary scholar and academic scholar, they say that the one paragraph entry on Jesus, they say it is a Christian forgery. That's the universal accepted understanding of that little scripture, that little passage in the works of Flavius Josephus that speaks on Jesus. They say it reeks. It smells of interpolation. It smells of something that was edited. It smells of something that was entered after Josephus dies. There was a man named Jesus who said he was a god, if you can call him that. It doesn't even fit the verbiage of the man Flavius Josephus. And so knowing that there is a passage, a paragraph in the works of Flavius Josephus, knowing that there is a passage in the works of Flavius Josephus that most scholars, that the consensus of scholarship believes is a Christian forgery, a Christian entry, that those are not the words of Flavius Josephus himself, we can take that out. And when we take that out, guess what? Neither Flavius Josephus nor Philo, the two leading first century historians, speak a word about the man you call Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ was utterly unimportant in the history of Judaism to Flavius Josephus and to Philo. Just something to think about. Now, I say that about those two historians so that when I mention the pagan of the 4th century, Emperor Constantine, so you have something to chew on. When the two leading contemporary historians of the 1st century during the days of Jesus, when they don't speak on Jesus, and it takes them 300 years later for this man, this heathen, this pagan, to finally give the Jesus movement its footing and to give Jesus Christ himself a place in religious history, a place that Jewish historians did not give Jesus. That further shows you how important this man was. A pagan. A pagan. A pagan. I'm gonna stop there because I got stuff to do. But I want to get to talking about Mary, the Virgin Mary, and the archetype that Christians borrowed to create her as a queen of heaven and the mother of God. All that's from paganism. I said the Virgin Mary. In part 3, we'll talk about it. In part 3, the Virgin Mary, she gets deified. She becomes the mother of God. That is a pagan archetype, a pagan motif. She is actually called the Queen of Heaven. Where have we heard that phrase before? How about Jeremiah chapter 7 and Jeremiah chapter 44, where Asherah, the Canaanite goddess, is called the Queen of Heaven. So was Isis in Egypt. She also was called the Queen of Heaven. And so in part 3, we're going to investigate how a phrase like the Queen of Heaven that goes back to Egypt and Sumer and Canaan, how it enters the annals of Christian theology, and the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, they have also given her the heathen and the paganistic title of Queen of Heaven. Come back for part 3. Come back for part 3, and we're going to get to that. But in closing, I want you to understand paganism is everywhere present today. We are all pagans to some degree. If you mention a day of the week, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, all those days of the week, those come after pagan Norse and Germanic and Scandinavian pagan deities or pagan gods. If you practice Easter, you are giving homage to the pagan goddess known as Eostra. Eostra, which is where the word Easter comes from. You can say, yeah, Easter's in the Bible one time. It means Pascha or Passover. But the real roots of Easter go back to the Germanics and to the fertility goddess, Eostra, who also brings not just her name to Christianity, but she brings her fertility egg. And she places her egg squarely amongst the Christians for Easter, where they claim that rabbits lay eggs. All that's paganism. But when you go away from this video, don't you go away thinking I am disrespecting or denigrating or talking shit against the pagans. I am pro-pagan. I'm pro-paganism. The point of this series is to show how paganism has fashioned and created Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The pagans gave you Abraham. Abraham was a pagan before anything else. The pagans gave you Christian and Christianity. The pagans literally gave you the word Christian. And then 3 centuries later, another pagan would stabilize Christianity. Another pagan would stop the persecution of the Christians. Another pagan that would quasi-convert. This pagan would convene the greatest and most important meeting in Christendom. The Great Council of Nice, the Council of Nicaea, to once and for all establish the divinity of Christ. Paganism on Front Street, paganism continually to be a part of our world. I don't care what you call yourself. Paganism has influenced your religion. The pagans were the first to understand or to think or to have God consciousness. Yes, they were. I'm not talking about the African world. The African world, we always had that. But as we understand the Middle Eastern world, Africa, since the dawn of time, thereafter the dawn of time, Africa has always had God consciousness, spirituality. But as it relates to the Middle East, the Middle Eastern world, and the Germanic and Scandinavian amongst the Gentiles, the white folks, the pagans were the first to have God consciousness. You can talk shit about the pagans all you want, but you're talking in ignorance and vanity, and you know not what you are saying. Facts upon facts. With that, y'all, we'll be back for more teaching. I see you soon. Peace.